Welcome back, lovely ladies. If you want to become the woman of your dreams, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like this video. And join our Patreon for even more exclusive content. Now, let's dive into today's story.
Snow's gym, the flyer screamed in 64-point type. Slightly smaller, it continued, come see our new location, 60-day free trial. To Paul, it seemed like a good deal. Free was always a good deal. The place was nearby too, and he'd been contemplating looking for a place to work out, and maybe make new friends. He'd noticed a small pudge developing around his middle, and he didn't want it to grow any larger. He had a hard enough time catching ladies' eyes without having to worry about that. That Saturday, he tossed some old shorts and a few t-shirts he didn't wear often into a small gym bag and drove down to the address listed on the flyer. The building was brand new, apparently built specifically for the gym, and was all curves and glass. People working out on various machines were plainly visible from the parking lot. Inside, just off the front lobby, was a juice bar, a store selling gear and clothing suitable for working out, and a massage table. Nice. The massive man behind the counter made for a good advertisement for working out all on his own. May I help you? Yeah. Paul proffered the flyer. I got this in the mail the other day. I was thinking I'd take you up on it. Ah, great, the receptionist said happily. Welcome to Snow's. Name's Marcus. Now I'm afraid there's a touch of paperwork for you to go through, but I promise it'll go fast. Then we can get you started. Marcus was right. Not 10 minutes later, Paul handed the last of them back over the counter. Here you go. Thanks. He flipped through them quickly. Looks good. Here's an access card for the locker room, good for 60 days. They're over that way, and the machines are in the big room behind me. A blind man couldn't have missed the big open room behind the counter filled with the latest exercise machines. But actually, I was thinking more of aerobics and such. I'm looking more to lose some fat than gain muscle. Oh, okay. Marcus sounded faintly disapproving, as if he thought the whole point of a gym was to gain muscle. Given his physique, maybe he did. The aerobics rooms are down that hallway to the left there. Here's a schedule of what classes are happening and when, he said, handing over a small brochure. The locker room was as nice as the rest of the place and about as busy. A lot of the people were in pretty good shape, though there were still plenty who clearly needed what the gym offered. After a quick glance at the newcomer, they all ignored him. Paul returned the favor, changing quickly into his gym outfit and stashing his bag in a locker. There were 4 rooms devoted to aerobics he saw when he made his way back to that area. 1 was empty, and 2 were in full swing. The last, however, looked like it was just getting started. Good timing, he murmured to himself as he stepped inside, and smiled. He'd hit the jackpot here. He'd expected an aerobics class to have more women than men, but this one seemed to be almost entirely female. In fact, looking around, Paul realized he was the only man in the room. And they were, a lot of them, in very good shape. He couldn't keep his smile from expanding into a full-fledged grin as he took a spot in the back row, both because he was late and so he could better watch the ladies as they jumped and stretched. Unlike the men in the locker room, the women looked at him a little oddly as he took his place. Or at least those nearby did. The rest seemed to be too busy chatting with each other to notice he'd come in at all. Even the instructor was fiddling with the sound system and didn't pay attention to one more person in the audience. Apparently satisfied with whatever she'd done, the voluptuous woman straightened and turned to face her class. All right, ladies, she said in a pleasant southern accent. Welcome to the first class of Boudoir Boost. My name's Vicky. We're going to get y'all in shape, or keep you there. Today we're just doing the basics, but by the time you finish the class, you'll know how to move and dance with confidence. Paul chuckled to himself. No wonder the women had looked at him that way. Ah, well. It was a little too late to leave without drawing attention to himself, but that was fine. It was still primarily an exercise class, after all. If he spent a few minutes in some embarrassing poses, well, he was never one to take himself too seriously. Vicky turned around for a moment to turn on the sound system. After a moment, twangy music with a vaguely Middle Eastern feel to it emerged from speakers built into the ceiling. All right, girls, the instructor said over the music. Let's start with some simple bends and stretches. Put your right hand on your hip and bend like this. Other than the unusual choice of music, for the first part of the class it was like any other, as Vicky led the class through various poses designed to loosen their muscles. All right, ladies, she said. Apparently she hadn't noticed Paul in the back row, Or perhaps she felt a single man wasn't worth mentioning. Now that we're warmed up, put both your hands on your hips. Now kind of twist. If you do it right, you can get your hips to move without the rest of your body moving much at all, like this. Paul felt a little silly as he followed along, but he couldn't deny it was a good workout. He could feel the beginning of that familiar burn in muscles that he usually ignored. "Very good, girls," Vicky called out. "Soon y'all be able to do this without your hands on your hips. And then maybe your man's hands will be there instead, she added with a wink. The image of a man standing close, hands on his hips as he did this, suddenly flickered in Paul's imagination. His nervous chuckle was added to the titters of the women. More moves followed, a new one every few minutes. Spins, bends, gyrating the waist and hips, and more. After a little while, Paul stopped worrying about how he looked as he performed. All that mattered was the music and Vicky's instructions, and then even the music faded away as he got into it. "Okay, girls," Vicky called out, "looking pretty good. Remember to swing those hips when you take those steps. You're doing this for yourself. Now here's some moves that'll really make you feel confident and empowered." His laughter this time was entirely unself-conscious. Vicky had been making encouraging comments like that through the whole session, and each time she mentioned your man, the image of someone, vague in form but absolutely exuding masculinity, flashed through his mind, initially alarming after the first 5 or 10 times he was used to it. "And done," Vicky said. The music continued on, though softer than before. "For this week anyway. Y'all come back next Saturday, you hear? Same time. Y'all looking great. Next we get you feeling even better." Paul blinked a few times. He was panting hard, hands on his knees. He'd never have guessed these moves would be so exhausting. But at least he'd really gotten into the groove there for a while. Stopping felt almost like he was waking up, but he could remember the last 2 hours perfectly well. 2 hours. Where had the time gone? "And that reminds me, folks," she continued. "If you haven't ordered your outfit for Boudoir Boost, you need to go to the shop and let them know. They can order it for you. Let them know now, so it'll come in time. You'll need it for some of the moves later in the course. And to help you feel even more confident, too," she added with a wink. Yes, Paul would have to order that. Weird, though. He'd never heard of exercises that needed specific workout clothing. Special gear, sure, like barbells or yoga mats or those giant rubber ball things. But an outfit? Still, this class was fun. He felt tired in the pleasant sort of way you do after a truly good and effective workout. And the scenery was great. And with that, the class was over. Being near the door, Paul was one of the first to leave. All those bends and twirls really helped with his posture. He stood straighter and took smaller steps than he did when he came in. With each one, his hips swayed provocatively back and forth. At the locker room, he changed out of his sweaty clothes he used for gym and back to his normal jeans and tee. He felt eyes upon him, this time, whereas earlier he'd been largely ignored. As he left, he looked over his shoulder to see several men watching him as he walked out. He smiled invitingly at them. Maybe he could make some new friends. A few women he recognized from class were leaving the gym shop as he entered, still wearing their workout clothes. They giggled and whispered to each other as he passed inside. Weird, he thought. The shop itself was attended by a cute little black girl, emphasis on little. The top of her head barely came to his armpits, and she was thin as a reed. If she weighed 80 pounds, Paul would be shocked. As it was, he felt a bit envious. He'd never weigh so little. "Hi," she greeted him brightly. "Need any help?" "Yes, thanks. Daniele," Paul said, peering at her name tag. "Vicky said I need a special outfit for her class." "Okay, Wait, you want a special outfit?" Daniele looked surprised. "For Vicky's class? Are you in Boudoir Boost?" "Well, sure." "You are aware that class is meant for women, right?" Paul rolled his eyes. That had been obvious from Vicky's first words. "Of course." "Oh, well, okay then." Her original chipper attitude was back in an instant. She pulled out an order form from beneath the counter. "We'll need to get your measurements for your outfit. Do you have a favorite color?" For some reason, she giggled. "Purple." Yes, I think we can get it in purple." She made a few notes on the form. "Now come over this way and I'll measure you." It wasn't quite the same as going to a tailor's or a haberdasher, though it was definitely similar. Daniele took the usual measurements down his body, arms, legs, and waist, but also took some around his neck, hips, and even his forehead, wrists, and ankles. She paid special attention to his chest, too. Okay, honey, all done, she said as she put the measuring tape away in a drawer. It looks like you made it in under the deadline, barely. It should arrive in about 2 months, so you'll have it when you need it. Anything else you need? No thanks. Okie dokie, see you when it comes in then. Daniele waved a cheerful farewell. Or maybe earlier. Huh? Oh. Paul didn't think he'd need to stop by anytime soon. His existing outfit was a little old, but it worked just fine. But manners never hurt. Right. See you later. He waved and headed out. Boudoir Boost had been a lot of fun, and a pretty good workout besides. Paul was hooked. He made sure to come to the next week's session, and the next. As always, he was the last to arrive, slipping into the aerobics room only a minute or so before Vicky started up the music. He'd always prided himself on being on time. The other girls, thankfully, got used to his presence pretty quickly. There were fewer giggles and sidelong looks from them in the second week, and by the third there were none at all. Paul was pleased that they accepted him as just another student. Some of them were acting downright friendly, though they weren't flirting with him, or as far as he could tell, they weren't anyway. He didn't mind, though. He was there to get in shape, not for the girls. The men at the gym, meanwhile, or some of them, seemed to pay him a little extra attention. At first he thought nothing much of it, until he realized they were flirting with him. They must have noticed him walking into a class meant for females. That was embarrassing at first, but he quickly grew used to it. It was even kind of fun, and by the third week he was egging them on. It was a compliment of sorts, after all, and it was kind of fun teasing the swishes back by acting a little swishy himself. One in particular seemed to be intrigued by the act, a rather well-built man that Paul usually saw using the free weights. He couldn't wait for the guy to ask him out. The look on his would-be admirer face when he told him that he was straight would be absolutely priceless. This session had been a bit more intense than the earlier ones. Vicky had stopped introducing new moves, but now the class was working on stringing them together. Individually, the sways and bends and shimmies were tiring enough. Put them together and they were exhausting. As the twangy Middle Eastern music played, Vicky kept reminding them that this would be worth it when they were done. "This is really going to make you feel amazing," she said. "Dance like this and feel the confidence and empowerment that you deserve." Images swum in Paul's head of him dancing with confidence and style. It felt nice, but only for a second or two. Then reality would make itself known, the sweat and aches and effort. But this all will be worth it, he told himself. "Hey," Paul turned. 3 women were standing a little outside the stream of those leaving the room. He didn't know their names, but they were instantly recognizable from class. One was a tall, thin blonde woman, and the other a more statuesque brunette. The last was a black woman with an enormous mane of hair. "Yes? We, just wanted to say hi," the blonde said, "and welcome to the class." "Welcome? This is the 4th session?" "Oh, well, she stammered. "We didn't think you'd stick around this long is all," the black woman cut in. She was a lot less nervous than the first lady. "This class is made for women, after all, and we figured you wouldn't be back after the first class. Why make friends with someone who'll be gone next week? But we realized it can work for guys, too, if they're, well, like you. So, welcome." Thanks," Paul said, unsure what else to say. "People like me, do they think I'm actually gay, too?" "I'm Rosa," the brunette said. She pointed at the blonde woman, then the African-American. "That's Erica and Cherry." "Hi, I'm Paul." The trio looked at each other. Some wordless communication seemed to pass between them. "Pauline," Cherry declared. Rosa nodded. "I don't know," Erica mused. "I kind of like Paula." "I prefer Paul, actually," Paul said. "Maybe that's your actual name, dear, but we're going to call you Pauline," Cherry said gently. "It seems more fitting, don't you think?" Erica shrugged, then joined in Rosa's nod of agreement. "Oh yeah, they definitely think I'm gay." I'd really rather not," he said weakly. Rosa frowned. Well, how about Paulie? That's not all that bad, is it?" "Well, all right, we'll keep calling you Paul," she said, sounding disappointed. "Thanks." That was close. On the good side, the deception just became that much bigger, and the joke that much greater. He wondered just how many people he'd wind up embarrassing with this. "At any rate, Paul, we always treat ourselves to drinks at the smoothie bar after these sessions. We were kind of, wondering if you might want to come along," Erica said. Paul smiled. "Sure. Just let me change first." The smoothies at Snow's gym turned out to be excellent. He'd never been much for smoothies, so he simply told the short man behind the counter to duplicate Erica's. The man paused. "You sure you want it identical?" he asked. "Oh, definitely give him the powder," Cherry told him, then turned to the man beside her. "They can add some special protein stuff here. Vicky recommended it to me. It's supposed to help you get into shape." Paul cocked his head quizzically. "Does it work?" "Oh my, yes," Erica gushed. The other two nodded enthusiastically. Yes, it worked, definitely. He made sure he got the powder in all his smoothies after that. As they drank, naturally they chatted. About the class, their diets, the latest styles, and of course, men. After being rebuffed a few times as he tried to correct a few comments he thought unjust, Paul mentally shrugged and joined in. That got a much better reception from them. And some men, after all, were cads. He hadn't quite realized how bad men could be until he started dredging up some tales of his own of male idiocy or thoughtlessness. He had a surprisingly large store of them, and before long he was having as much fun as they were in their man-bashing. It was a lot of fun being just one of the girls. "Good news, girls," Vicky called out with a smile as she entered the room. "Your outfits are in. I want you all to pick them up at the store out front and change into them, then meet me back here in half an hour. That means we'll start late, but it's about time we start working out while wearing the right clothing." Paul waited for Rosa and the rest out in the hallway so they could go as a group. Over the last 4 weeks, they'd gotten for smoothies after each class. The company was good, the conversations were fun, and he had to admit that protein powder was doing wonders for him. Along with the workouts, his waist had really shrunk down, noticeably so. Lately, he'd been invited on some of their other outings, mostly clothes shopping. That had been kind of fun, but they'd tried to persuade him to get new clothes himself as well. So far, he'd managed to beg off. His own were still in perfectly good shape after all. But lately, he'd started thinking they might have a point. He could use a smaller shirt, and unfortunately, some new pants as well. That powder may have helped melt the fat off his waist, but it seemed to have gone straight to his butt, making his jeans decidedly tight. In the meantime, he had listened to their advice to the point of letting his hair grow out a little. He could always cut it later, and he'd wanted to try a longer style for a while anyway. You can just do more with longer hair. Most importantly, it got them to lay off about the clothing for now. The outfits, it turned out, came in small cellophane-wrapped packages about the size of a throw pillow that Daniele had arranged on a table. There were several shades of each of those, plus gold, yellow, black, and yes, purple. It was an amazingly colorful display, but somehow they made for a pleasant mix, not a jarring one. Paul's set was easy to find. Daniele had arranged the packages in alphabetical order. She checked his name off a list as he picked it up. "Hope you enjoy that," she called out warmly. "Thanks," he replied over his shoulder. "I'm sure I will." Hips swinging, he made his way to the locker room. It was, for once, deserted. He tore the plastic wrap open eagerly, careful not to rip the contents. But as he pulled out one piece after another, excitement turned to dismay. A skirt, long and flowing. A bra, for want of a better word, except this was clearly a garment meant to be fully on display, not underwear. Next came 2 small bands that, he realized after a moment, were meant to be worn on the wrists, and a headband. All were covered with beads that made them shimmer as he turned them. And lastly, a half dozen or so pieces of diaphanous fabric. All were a pastel shade of purple that was so light it was nearly pink. For nearly a minute, Paul sat on the bench, staring at the outfit. It was like something a belly dancer would wear, all incredibly feminine. Come to think of it, a lot of the moves the class had been learning would look great in a belly dancing routine. Those gauzy pieces are probably veils or scarves or something. He'd been learning the art without even realizing it. "I can't wear this," he mumbled to himself. "I can't possibly." Well, what did I expect, he thought, angry at himself. I knew this class was for women. Still, this was a bit much, except, was it? Was it really? The costume was already paid for after all, and it hadn't been cheap. And he liked Boudoir Boost. It was doing great things for his body. Did he really want to quit? Over this? Over a little thing like some pretty clothing? And it was pretty. So pretty. Just the thing to catch my man. Before the thought was even complete, he was stripping out of the nasty old shorts and tee and into the beautiful new outfit, custom made for him. It felt weird. The material only touched his hips, chest, and wrists, and it was so light that he felt like he was wearing next to nothing or perhaps less. Yet it felt good. Very nice, loose, free. Maybe I could get to like pastel purple. He tried a few moves from class, and the skirt moved in waves down his legs like water. Whoa. It was mesmerizing, and he was the one wearing it. He could only imagine what it'd look like to someone watching him. Filled with new enthusiasm, he strode out into the public areas carrying the loose cloth in his arms. He didn't get far before a loud whistle pierced the gym. He turned to see that weightlifter walking his way, wearing a large, friendly smile. Paul's heart began to beat faster. Here it comes, he thought. He's going to crap his pants when I tell him I'm straight. Hello there, the guy said. I'm Tim. Been watching you for a while, and once I saw you walk out in that, well... Hi, Tim, Paul said, unexpectedly flustered. The man's voice was deep and masculine, the perfect match for his body. It was intimidating. Yeah, that's it, intimidating. You like it? He plucked at the skirt nervously. Oh, yes, very much. Tim stepped closer. I was wondering if you're interested, Do you... He gulped, then said in one rush, Do you want to get some smoothies with me after gym? Paul smiled. He opened his mouth and paused. Do I really want to do this? He looked Tim up and down. The big, muscular body, the charming nervousness at asking for a date. Yes, he decided. I do. Yes, he breathed. Tim grinned. Oh, thank God. For a moment I thought, well, I don't know what I thought. He stepped forward and gave him a quick hug. I know just where to go to. You'll love it, hon, I promise. What's your name? Paul just stood there a second, stunned. It's nice. Paulie, I'm Paulie. The name the trio had suggested seemed so perfect now. Ooh, nice name. See you when your class is done, Paulie. Tim waved happily and walked back to his friends. Yeah, I can always drop that news on him later, after all. Imagine it after a few dates. But his words felt hollow even to him. Maybe. I wish I had something better to wear. Perhaps it's time to take to the girls' advice and let them help me pick out new clothes. Paulie walked back to Boudoir Boost, looking forward to seeing just how to dance properly. After all, he finally had a man to show it off to, and that was what the class was for. He couldn't wait to see Tim's reaction. Epilogue. All right, ladies, Vicky called out as the music ended. Congratulations to y'all on sticking with it and finishing Boudoir Boost. The instructor applauded with an expression that invited everyone else to join in. By the sound of it, most did. If you practice these moves once a week, you'll keep yourself thin and very flexible, she said with a wink once the applause died down a bit. And if you practice them for yourself, you'll feel more confident than ever. The ladies comprising her audience laughed and then started migrating towards the door. Vicky looked over her students with a feeling of satisfaction. It felt good to improve the ladies' lives so much, including in the ways they probably didn't even notice. With the subliminals added to the music, they were nearly guaranteed to want to stay in shape, preferably by dancing for themselves, and they'd feel motivated to be more attractive and confident as well. Win-win. Miss Vicky? A soft voice said off to the side. Yeah, hun? She said, and turned. She recognized the person standing demurely before her as one of her students, but now that she was standing right in front of her, rather than in the back of the class, with several rows of other women between them, something looked a little off. She felt her smile congeal. Oh, no. I just wanted to thank you, he said. He had a set of hips and butt that would really draw men's eyes, and of course the class had given him a nice thin waist and some truly great legs to boot. But his chest was not just flat. It had no hint of breasts, none at all. And even though his makeup was quite competently applied, it was still clearly a male's face. You really helped me get rid of that awful tummy bulge, he continued, unaware of her growing dismay. And find a new hobby too. I never realized just how fun belly dancing could be before I popped into your class that day. Popped in? This class was for women. The subliminals were tailored for a feminine mindset. Visions of lawsuits flashed before her eyes. Vicky struggled not to let her dread show. And it even helped me find a guy, the man gushed. He's he's great, in every way. And then he giggled. Vicky stared for a moment. He looked frankly pretty darn good in the outfit he'd chosen, one of the better ones Snow's gym made available to those who took Boudoir Boost. So you're happy then, with the results? She said tentatively. Oh yes, your class has really changed my life, thank you. And he stepped in close to give her a big hug. Just something friendly. You're welcome, Vicky said. She looked on speechless as he sashayed off towards the exit, where a nicely buff man gave him a long kiss, then wrapped an arm around his waist and led him away. Maybe she wouldn't have to worry about lawyers after all.
Did you like the story? Hit that like button and tell me what you thought in the comments. Do you want to hear more stories? Subscribe and hit the bell. For exclusive content and early access, check out our Patreon. You can find the link in the description, or you can watch any of the videos shown on my right. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.